What is going on, everybody? Welcome on in here to Thursday Night Live on the Auburn Undercover podcast here at AU Club. It's a gorgeous night, Jason, and a heck of a night to record outside. Weather's starting to get a little cooler. It's feeling like the fall, and as always on Thursday, happy to be here at AU Club.
Yeah, absolutely. We get to be outside tonight, look over the putting green, and this is a great night to be outside. And like I said, hopefully heading towards another good weekend of weather. It looks like there's a little bit of rain, but maybe Sunday morning, so it'll hold off after that late kickoff on Saturday night. So looking forward to having another good weekend of weather and see if the Tigers can go make a few plays to win a game. I think that's what we're waiting on. There's you can break all these things down if you want to,
sure,
Nathan, but that's the big part of it we're waiting on to see. But yeah, great to be here at AU Club once again.
And it should be another great atmosphere on Saturday night. Auburn gets back-to-back night games. The one coming up, number 16, Missouri at 6:45 Central Time on SEC Network. Fourth straight ranked opponent for Auburn coming up this weekend. And Jason, we sat here last week and used the word opportunity to talk about Auburn facing off against Georgia. Of course, that was one that felt like it was going to be very telling, or at least that's what we talked about beforehand. It's going to be very telling whether Auburn was going to take advantage of that opportunity in that game. Obviously, we won't sit here and rehash everything that happened against the Bulldogs, but it does not mitigate the fact that you have another opportunity against Missouri. You do, but it now is a different feel, I think, than you wanted to be at this point in the season, where you feel like you're trying to answer some questions rather than, let's go win a football game. It's like the frustrations are starting to mount up, where maybe it's not just as simple as, you need to get over the hump and win one of these games.
Now I think obviously anytime you do that, you go, yes, that could be a good but yeah, it feels like just finding a way to win 13-10, it might satisfy you in the short term, but you need to start showing something, especially offensively. Now, defensively, ran out of gas a little bit in the second half late in that game. Offensively, can you go make a few plays? Can you create something in the passing game? I mean, I think that's obviously the thing that you look at coming off the Georgia game once again, is you look at the inability to make anything happen in the pass game. Lots of opportunities once again. And we're talking about that reminded you a little bit more of Oklahoma than it did Texas A&M, because there were some plays to be had against Georgia. You made a few of them early, couldn't finish when you got down the red zone a couple of times, and man, in the second half you only really had two opportunities, and you had two open throws to continue drives, even to go maybe score a touchdown, and didn't make it. And so coming into this one, we talked about, would there be a change? Would we see something different? We still could Saturday, but
Sure.
It doesn't look like it's going to be that way to start the game on Saturday night.
No, and personnel-wise, I really wouldn't expect, based on what we saw in practice this week, and obviously the one that people keep talking about is Jackson Arnold. Do you make a change there at quarterback? But as you kind of referenced, Jason, maybe at the beginning of the game, no, but it does sound more like, especially when you look at Hugh Freeze's comments from Tiger Talk, talking about Ashton Daniels in particular, that maybe there is more of a leash than there's been the past few games. And that makes a lot of sense. I don't think you can continually point at Jackson Arnold's lack of critical throws, which is what Hugh Freeze has done. It's like, hey, whereas he struggled, that's what he said. He says he doesn't make throws in the biggest parts of the games. You can't say that multiple weeks on end and not start to tighten up that leash.
At least not to think about having a plan. I won't say an exit plan, but maybe a parachute plan in case it continues. And you look up and, you think about, you're in the middle of the second quarter and you've got a couple of first downs and maybe 3 points. You start thinking about, okay, is it time? And I've kind of had those thoughts in my head each of the last 3 games at some point different in the game. I thought maybe it's time to see if you can find a spark. And I think that's the thing you look at. Can Jackson Arnold get you off going? Because look, we'll dive into it a little bit more, but it doesn't feel like going into this one that you're going to be able to just line up and hand the ball off against the Missouri defense. It's been pretty good against the run. You're probably going to have to make some throws down the field. I think Missouri knows that. I think Auburn knows it. And this is a really interesting one, because if you're Hugh Freeze and Derek Nix and Ken Austin, you may have to go against every tendency you have, which might be a good thing, because on the other side, Corey Batoon knows you really well. And that's something to pay attention to Saturday night.
I was just about to say, Auburn knows it, Derek Nix knows it, Hugh Freeze knows it, Corey Batoon knows it well. Of course, that's somebody that's worked with Hugh Freeze previously. He said it last year before they played Missouri, one of his closest friends in the coaching industry. And so, same system that that Freeze has been running, and so obviously Batoon knows that. And yeah, getting into this Missouri defense, I think there's a lot to point to with their offense that's been impressive, but for me, because of the importance of Auburn needing to step up on the offensive side of the ball, you look at what Missouri does defensively, and there's a reason they're the number 4 run defense in the country.
I think it's 2.
Number 2, whatever you want to look at, yards per carry, whatever. It's very good, regardless of how you slice it, and sacks are mixed in there as well when you look at just base rushing yardage, and that's a big thing to point out as well because they love to get after the quarterback.
Yep.
2 guys in particular for Missouri. Damon Wilson, there was a point where PFF earlier in the season had a stat. Damon Wilson, the Georgia transfer, by the way, he had as many pressures on the season as Georgia's entire defensive line, so it's kind of spoke to maybe shouldn't have let that guy walk away. And then Zion Young, who's kind of that big defensive end. Both of those guys I wrote about in our matchup story, Jason. I mean, they have combined for a ton of pressures so far this season. Auburn's pressure to sack rate is, according to our buddy Callum McAndrew of the Columbia Tribune, Auburn's pressure to sack rate is the highest in college football, meaning if you can get pressure, you are going to take the quarterback down. Here comes a Missouri defense that delivers an average of 19 pressures a game. And so we've talked about running game over and over again. You have to establish it. You cannot force Jackson Arnold to drop back over and over again, and you're going to try to do it this week without your number 2 running back.
Yeah, and like I said, and against the defense that's been pretty good against the run. Yes, they are number 2 nationally in rushing yards allowed per game at 72.8. Give up 2.7 yards per carry, which is, I think that's number 8 in yards per carry. But you start looking at them and you go, now, the schedule has a factor in some of it because they've been at home every week. They've played some teams that aren't that great offensively, but you look and you go, they're 17th nationally in points allowed per game. But you look at that when you go dig a little deeper and you start going, okay, what does it look like? And you gave up 6 to Central Arkansas, 6 to UMass, 10 to Louisiana. But you're giving up 31 to Kansas, 20 to South Carolina, and 27 to Alabama. So teams have been able to score some points on them when they've played better offensive teams. Question is, can Auburn be one of those better offensive teams? We haven't seen anything right now that leads us to believe that can be the case. But, obviously you have the potential to do that. But, again, getting back to what you talked about, the pressure rate, their ability to stop the run, can you give yourself some 3rd and 4s and 3rd and 5s that we saw early against Georgia? Can you consistently do that again against Missouri?
Yeah, I mean, because it was there. It was there against a good Georgia defense. I thought the game plan was obviously tremendous. The scripts were tremendous. They had 2 drives in that first half against Georgia that combined to take up more than a quarter, more than 15 minutes of time. When you look at the first drive, and then the one at halftime that ended in the Jackson Arnold fumble, it was 130 rushing yards and 107 passing yards for Auburn in the first half against Georgia. It was exactly what you wanted that group to look like all season. But from talking to players this week, I mean, it's a big question of kind of what happened after that. Was it just simply a lack of execution? Did the Arnold fumble play a factor in that? Regardless, you've got to figure out how to be more consistent because we've seen this offense now do it in spurts. I don't think Missouri's good enough to where you have to do it every single play. I think you can beat them just being pretty good in this game. I don't think you have to be perfect.
Well, we talked about it last week. You went, look, what does it take on offense to win games for them? We say, well, this got to be okay.
Yeah.
Auburn was good in the first half, weren't great, but another okay half in the second half probably gets you a win last weekend.
Absolutely.
An okay game against Oklahoma gets you a win. Heck, it might get you a win at Texas A&M if you're just okay on offense. Can you be okay Saturday night? I mean, that you don't have – okay to me is can you score 24? 24 points. You're not saying you don't need to score 50. Can you score 24 and be okay? If you do that right now, you're in overtime in a game and you won all the rest of them. That's all it takes. And so, but the question is, can you get there? I don't know. That's going to be a tough one to think about it. I don't think you can do it unless you create some explosive plays in the pass game. I just don't think you can grind it out enough against Missouri to do it unless you can throw the ball down the field.
Yeah, and especially with the running back situation being what it is now, the fact that Omar Mabson, who is, I believe he's still 17, he's a reclassified freshman.
Yeah, we can throw that out there.
We throw the Ryan Williams thing. I mean, yeah, he's a young guy who should still be playing at Auburn High. He's now going to be your number 2 running back. And you said Freeze talked today about Justin Jones. Regardless of who the number 3 back is, whether it's him or Alvin Henderson, when it was Damari and Cobb, it was really just them.
Yeah.
So I would expect them really not to go too deep into that rotation. But there's going to be a point in this game where you can't have Jeremiah Cobb in there for every snap, and Omar's going to get some important reps.
He is. Now, I think especially in the run game, if you're able to run the football, I think you see more Omar Mabson. If you get to where you're going to have to throw the football and it's third down and you got some third down situations, I think you could see Justin Jones in the game because of that experience, his size, physicality, some of those things as a protector. I'm not ruling out, too, in some third and long situations that they don't put Tate Johnson in the backfield and just say, hey, we're just going to go ahead and try to max protect as much as possible and see if we can throw the football. And so I think you could see some different things. We haven't seen that this week. I'm just kind of throwing it out there, but I wouldn't be shocked. And so you start to look at possibilities for Auburn. You look at things I think Omar Mabson's a guy that gives you every bit of what you had in the run game with Damari Alston. I think Omar is a guy that has some fantastic – he's going to be fresh. As Hugh Freeze said today, he's pretty fired up about the opportunity he's going to have. And so I think those things factor in. I think one of the things you look at now is the health of this team, especially Brandon Frazier, because that's the one – he got banged up, and nobody's kind of talked about that. But, played without him except for a few plays in the second half, and it really took a big bite out of Auburn's offense.
Yep.
I think he'll give it a go, but that's one that bears watching because without him, Auburn just doesn't have another one of those guys. And you don't have anybody like I said, Brandon Frazier, the closest thing you got to what Missouri has on the other side, because you're going to face one of the best tight ends in the country Saturday. You need Brandon Frazier to give you some of those same things this weekend.
Yeah, just on the injury front. And you're right about, maybe a third down plan. They've done that with Frazier a few times this year where they put him in the backfield.
Yeah.
And they're just like, look, we know that we're going to pass protect, and we're just going to do it anyway because he's really big and he knows how to do it. Yeah, Freeze said it after the Georgia game. Like, it was kind of snuck in there in his press conference, but he was like, when we lost Frazier, that hurt the game plan. Like, really, he's a guy who does a lot of different things. Lower back is what Hugh Freeze said today.
And he has an ankle. So there was an ankle last week. Okay. He said the back, they feel good about it. The ankle is what does it feel like when they get out there on the game day. So he's dealing with a couple of things. Champ Anthony, we've seen him practicing this week, and we've seen him catching the ball without that protective padding on. I think he's a guy that we'll probably see, but it doesn't look like we're going to see Bryce Diaz, and he's a guy that's continued to get more playing time for this defense.
I thought he was really good against Georgia. He was really good in coverage, I thought. They kind of pulled him out pretty often with running backs and tight ends, and he covered pretty well. Yeah, he's in concussion protocol, which I think some people – I didn't notice that during the game, but some people talked about it afterwards, that he took a pretty hard hit in that one. And, Auburn's young linebackers continue to play really well, and on that note – Jason, on the other side of the ball, it's going to need to be another good game for this front seven, which they've done many times this season, because Auburn knows Ahmad Hardy very well. They know him from last year. They played him at Louisiana Monroe, but as you and Christian noted during the transfer process, he was the guy they were really heavy after. And right now you can see why, because this guy is a load for the Missouri offense, an offense that wants to run the ball first and foremost, and that's something Bo Pribula can do as well as run the ball.
Very athletic quarterback. Obviously, Ahmad Hardy, you look at him, and he's a guy that leads the country, I believe. I haven't seen it, but I think he probably leads the country in yards after contact. He runs through tackles. He did it last week against Alabama. He was running through tackles. He doesn't stop moving. And so this is one, I thought there was a play last weekend where Xavier Atkins just got to the ball carrier and held on to a jersey. That's what you're going to have to do with Ahmad Hardy. You can't knock him down. You're going to have to get to him, hold on, let somebody else come and help you. So that's going to be a thing to watch is can you wrap him up? And it's old school, but it's an old school approach where you're going to have to approach it, for Auburn's defense against him. But they got a couple of guys. They got another running back with 400 yards. This team runs the football. They want to run it. They're physical. Offensive line has a couple of tackles that are guys that are pretty good. You got an Alabama native at guard and Curtis Pegler, a kid from Demopolis that Auburn kind of showed some interest in late, but you got an offensive lineman now that'll come back to Alabama wanting to show what he can do. So, really interesting dynamic. Bo Pribula is a guy that's probably 23 years old, but this is the first time he will have started a game away from home. And can Auburn impact him, even though he's older? That different feel for him, does that show up Saturday night?
Ahmad Hardy after contact, 606 yards. This season after contact, 5.2 yards per contact per carry.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just unbelievable.
No, he's done a great, and that's the thing, is like you can still be in the right positions and do the right things, and Ahmad Hardy can still make you pay. So you're going to have to wrap up, and I really like what I've seen from Elijah Melendez. the last couple of weeks, and his run fits, the things he's doing in the running game. Obviously, Xavier Atkins there, Robert Woodyard. That linebacker group's getting better. This will be the test because I didn't think Georgia last week had a running back that made you go, oh, you better watch out for that guy. Mm-hmm. Nate Frazier is a guy that me and Christian saw in San Antonio. I think Nate Frazier's a good running back. He doesn't look like the running backs that Georgia's had in the last few years that have gone on to the NFL. Ahmad Hardy looks like those backs, and so it's going to be a different type of test for this Auburn defense for sure.
Yeah, Ahmad Hardy right now number 2 in the country in rushing, as Missouri, I believe, is number 6 in the country in rushing. Number 1 rusher in the country, by the way, is whoever Charles Kelly's got running back
Absolutely,
right now at Jack State.
Yep, I think he was from Texas Tech, I believe. TCU. But he led them in rushing last year, and now he's at Jacksonville State, and he put up big numbers last night. They beat Delaware at home, so the Gamecocks playing well for Charles Kelly.
Yeah, you mentioned that Auburn defense. It's I had a conversation with somebody this week, Jason, where I felt like I was taking crazy pills, having to defend the fact that I think Auburn's a pretty good defense. Two things can be true at once. You can have a team that is heading in the wrong direction, and you can have a team that really needs to find out what's going on here, or else things could get very iffy. And you can also have a defense that's playing really, really well. I just continue to be really impressed with this group. The biggest criticism you could make about them against Georgia is that they gave up that 9-minute drive. A stat that Patrick found after the game, by the way, is longest drive in Georgia history in terms of time. So that was pretty significant. But that was after Auburn went 3 and outs 3 straight times. So it's like there's only so long that a group can continue to produce. What I wonder is that going to apply to the season? We've talked about that. If Auburn's going to have an opportunity to finally get one of these, you got to keep holding on.
Yeah.
Because you cannot quit at any point.
It's going to take that.
Yeah, you can't have a dam breaking.
Yeah, because like I said, it doesn't feel like this is an offense that's ready to go score 38 in a game. And so because of that, if you're going to win, it's probably going to take you holding the opponent under 24, 17, 21, something like that to give you a chance to win. So you're going to have to continue to be able to do those things defensively. And the good thing about this defense is that, you got a bunch of young guys that are hungry, that are continuing to play more and more. Normally for those guys to kind of go, hey, normally it's a group of older guys that go like all of our things are done. You still play hard on Saturdays, but it's the thought of how do you get to Saturday when you've done this over and over and over again. And I think back to 2008, that was an Auburn defense early on that played really well, and they just said enough's enough. I don't think this group will get there, but you just don't know what it looks like in a couple of weeks depending on it. So, yeah, I think if your offense can go help you, this is a defense that can win you football games, and we've seen that even in these last 3 games.
And there's reason, and I'll pull up a stat here. This is from Cody Goodwin over at Power Mizzou, our sister site. You mentioned this being Bo Pribula's first road start. This is Missouri's first road game of the season in Week 8, which is insane.
Yes.
Under Drinkwitz, Missouri is only 1-4 in their SEC road openers, 7-13 in all SEC road games, and 10-17 overall away from home under Drinkwitz. Of course, it's hard to win on the road in the SEC, but there's at least some factors here, and they it's another sellout in this game. It's going to be a night game. I don't think the energy is going to be comparable to Georgia, but it still needs to be a fan base that is angry to get a win.
Yeah.
I'd have no doubt of that because we've seen Auburn have incredible atmospheres just again and again and again and again, even when they've been down on their luck as a team. But I just maybe there's a reality where Missouri comes in and lands a big punch and Auburn is really on its heels and Missouri's able to win big because of that. But Christian was talking about it before we got rolling. It's like if you give yourself an opportunity to have a hot start in this game, this is a Missouri team that has not done it in this spot so far this season.
No. I mean, that's it. I think that's a big part of this one too, because of the way you finished last week. I don't think you need to go out if you're Auburn and in the first quarter have a couple of 3 and outs, have 35 yards of offense and be trailing Missouri. I don't think that's the way to go about getting a win. It never is in any game. I definitely don't think that's the recipe this weekend. I think you need to get out, get some momentum, get the crowd back into it, start to have some. Like, this team has no mojo. Even in Baylor, there wasn't really any mojo. You grinded one out, and you got to win. Not against South Alabama, not really against Ball State. like this team doesn't have that yet. Can you go find it? Hugh Freeze talked about it. We talked to him today, and he goes, look, I talked to other coaches, and it's a real thing. I had somebody reminded me yesterday when I was doing a radio show and said, look, it feels exactly like Auburn did in the last couple of years under Coach Dye, 91, 92. They were right there. You had those games. You had games against Alabama. You were right there and just could not make a play. And so how does it switch? How does it flip? The first thing, somebody's got to make a play. That's one of the first things. Go make a play in a clutch situation. Go get a ball. Go make a throw. Pick six. You need a little bit of mojo. Can you find it? Because it's hard to come by. And it seems like the harder you try, the harder it gets.
Yep.
That's the thing now. Can you find somebody to do some of those things and allow you to take a deep breath in a game and go, okay, that's what it's supposed to feel like.
And you find yourself straining a little bit, and it does become more difficult the harder you try, especially when this, as you brought up this week in a story, this trend goes back to last season too, of just Auburn either having a lead, it was tied, or a lead in the second half of 8 of 9 SEC games?
Well, so you look at it and go, there's 8 games last year, 3 games this year that you've lost.
Yeah.
So you think about it, that's 8 total games in the last 2 years that you've lost SEC games, where in the second half you're either tied, had the lead, or had the ball with a chance to tie or take the lead. 3 of those. We're not saying, look, well, what happens if you win all 8 of them? This went 3 of them.
Yeah.
Went 2 games last year and 1 this year. If you're sitting here 4-2 right now, you still got everything to play for.
Yeah.
Last year you win 2 more games, all of a sudden you go 7-5, and you play in a bowl game, and you go, okay, that's a little bit of again. That's it. That's how close. And I agree with Hugh Freeze. They are that close, but also they're that far away too.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
so it's the same thing. You can be both. You can be really close, but when it's really close over and over again, it does feel like you're a long way away too. And so it can be both those things.
Yeah, and before we move on to some games around the country this week and touch on this one, sorry, we're making sure. Are we good?
You're good.
Everything good? This weekend feels like, because even with Georgia, even with how heartbreaking that was for Auburn in the second half, I think the officiating maybe provided a little bit of a landing spot for some people. This weekend feels like, I'm not saying Hugh Freeze isn't already feeling pressure and people aren't already talking about that, because that's happening, but this one to me feels like you go out there and perform poorly and lose, and it's just like things have really, I think, started to ramp up aggressively in the last couple games.
Yeah.
Texas A&M was like really people you saw throw up the red flags. What has been your response to people, Jason? Because it's a question I've been asked a million times by people I know this week of like, hey, what do you think about Freeze? What do you think about this situation right now? What has been your response?
Yeah, I got a few of those from my mailbag for tomorrow, and I'm torn, because I said, look, on the one hand, they have built this roster from nothing to a competitive roster. They have done those things, but now you have to see more. And so, I've had people go like, well, we don't know. I don't know what it means as we sit here today, because look, I don't think that this is one of these things that we saw at Penn State where you go, man, I don't think it happens and you have a coaching change. But we also don't know what the next 3 or 4 weeks look like, because if it looks really bad, then things can change in a hurry, as we just found out. Like I said, James Franklin a month ago was coaching the number 3 team in the country,
Had the lead in overtime.
lost an overtime game. As we're driving back from Texas A&M, we're listening to lost an overtime game against Oregon at home, and you go, man, they're right there.
Yep.
Well, they lose 2 games they shouldn't have lost to, and all of a sudden he's right there in the unemployment line. Now he's got $50 million to do it with, but so you look and go, like that's how quickly things change. So as it stands today, I don't feel like there's anything that has changed, but you don't know what the next couple of weeks look like either.
Yeah, I think I keep saying we're going to learn a lot, but Saturday, I think the way this team responds, I kind of said it this week, it's like, their back is against the wall here. There's really no way around it. Are they going to have that fight, or are they just going to kind of wither away against that wall? I tend to believe that this team is going to be fine motivation-wise and all that. But motivation doesn't win a football game.
No.
You got to go out there and actually start making some plays. So it's going to be an interesting one on Saturday night, Jason.
It is. Before we go to football, let's do 2 or 3 minutes. You were in Birmingham.
Yes.
Basketball.
Yes.
Exhibition game. Let's first think exhibition game. But you're talking about learning something. Mm-hmm. I think that's where you saw a coaching staff learn a lot about themselves and about this team in a game against Oklahoma State. And, man, there was, I think, a really valuable experience for them as they can now take a look at that, figure out what this team looks like as they start getting ready for a season.
Yeah, Stephen Pearl said last week, don't overreact if Auburn wins by 20. Don't overreact if Auburn loses by 20. Well, they did not find themselves in either of those situations. Instead, they found themselves in an absolute thriller, a game that went all the way down to the wire, a game where Auburn had a couple really impressive comebacks. They were down by 11 in the first half, and you saw an early timeout, which already shows me he's different than his dad because he stopped a run with a timeout, and then they were down by 7 with about 3 minutes left in the game. Came back there, and yeah, you're exactly right. This is an exhibition. I think people need to also remember that even during key portions of this game, they were still experimenting with stuff. They were still experimenting with lineups. I'm not sure you would have seen some combinations that you would have seen otherwise in the regular season, but you did learn a lot. And Stephen Pearl said, look, this is going to be more valuable. This film, this little case of film right here, is more valuable than anything we've taught all summer and all off season. Yeah. Like just getting and being able to face somebody else. And now they get to do it again. He's excited about the timing of what that looks like. They have 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks ish, 3 weeks actually, to get ready for Memphis. They'll play in Atlanta. That's a really good team.
Yes.
But I think they were a little disheartened by the fact that, at least Stephen Pearl was talking about it. He owned this loss from a defensive perspective. Mm-hmm. Like, we know this team was going to have issues on defense, and that was pretty clear on Wednesday. He said, look, we had a terrible game plan about getting the ball out of their guards' hands. Oklahoma State was down. Some players had to use some different lineups, and I think they were just thrown off by how good a couple of these guards were in this game. But on the offensive end, Jason, as we've known from watching this team, no concerns, really. I mean, Todd Pettiford had a bad game shooting, still makes a huge 3 in overtime to tie the game. But Keyshawn Hall, I mean, he took over. He had the last 9 points of regulation to bring Auburn to a tie and send it to overtime, and got a lot of exciting weapons on that end of the floor.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, I've been saying it, you have to, I believe it. Look, I think Keyshawn Hall leads this team in scoring. I think he's an all-SEC player by the time the season's done, and I think he talked about that at SEC Media Days, going had a little bit of chip on his shoulder that he wasn't considered as an all-SEC type player, even though what he had done last year in the Big 12. And you saw it. He's a bucket getter.
Yep.
That's just what he is. And those guys are really good to have. You saw last night what that capability is for a team. And I think that's going to be a big deal for them as they move forward. But, yeah, just wanted to kind of get a couple of thoughts on basketball there before we touch on what a really big weekend in college football, especially in the SEC.
Yeah, and I mean, there was, some individual guys who I thought just really stood out in terms of just how they looked, even if you didn't look at their stat sheet. Elijah Freeman he's got some stuff. As Steve Pearl said, he's got some special. I mean, that is a kid with some great skill sets. And
I
then
think him and Sebastian Williams-Adams are the two guys that maybe surprised folks that haven't watched this team this summer. I saw some national guys talking about both those guys. Not a surprise to us who have watched practice this summer.
Yeah.
But, I mean, Sebastian Williams-Adams is just, you're like, it's old school and it's cliche, but like, he's just a basketball player. That's what he is. You look up and he has 9 rebounds and have a couple of blocks, have an assist. He doesn't have to shoot it if he can, but he's a guy that's going to help you win basketball games. I think his minutes are going to continue to grow for this team, but especially because of his body and his physicality. Very,
very quickly, and then we'll move to football. It's Keyshawn Murphy. Everybody came away saying, well, none of that matters except for how he feels. I think he's going to be okay. We sit here without any clarification at all because Auburn evaluated him today. We probably will know more tomorrow, but just never what you want to see because it wasn't even a basketball play. He's helping Sebastian Williams-Adams up and just slips and immediately grabs his leg. I mean, it was scary in the moment. But the reason I think they're kind of optimistic about it is, number one, that seemed to be the way Stephen Pearl was leaning yesterday. Now, you don't know anything. But also, he was up moving around by himself, and the trainers were not all eyeballs on him. They kind of just let him sit on the bench and then
I think a guy that has dealt with some not tenderness in a knee all summer.
Yeah.
All you do is you move one wrong way and you go, uh-oh, and you go, all right. So, I think hopefully it's nothing serious for him because he's going to be a really important part of things for this team because they just don't have anybody else like that.
Yeah, he's the guy on the interior. You mentioned it. It is a really big weekend in college football. Our game of the week in our forecasters was number 5 Ole Miss at number 9 Georgia. I tend to think maybe on paper, maybe in a vacuum, Ole Miss is a better team right now. I just wasn't blown away by what Georgia did here last weekend. But this also, to me, is kind of the classic Kirby Smart gets angry. They're also really good at Sanford Stadium. They just have been.
Really good at home. You look at Ole Miss and you go, like, was last week against Washington State a one-off? Probably. But it also worries you a little bit that, I look at them offensively and you go, and they've gotten such production out of a smaller quarterback that's moved up. But all of a sudden you go, the Georgia speed, the Georgia athleticism outside, and what does that do to this Ole Miss offense? I think it's going to challenge them to score enough points to win in Georgia.
With LSU at Vanderbilt, this is, I believe the stat was, it is the first time ever that Vanderbilt has been favored against a top 10 team. And you had another stat as well about how long
like it was at least back to 1978 that they've been a favorite against a ranked team. They've been an underdog in 178 straight games.
It's unbelievable. And I think they have a pretty good opportunity. I like the matchup for them.
Well, here's the thing. I think it's a bad matchup for LSU because LSU's offense hasn't played very well. Vandy's defense isn't great, but their offense can score. So I think Vandy can score enough points to win this game. And if they do, everybody's kind of talked about all these people. If LSU loses at Vanderbilt, Brian Kelly's going to be squarely on that seat that everybody likes to talk about. Even though they've done all these good things, he's going to be there if they lose at Vanderbilt.
Tennessee at Alabama. Goodness, is it the third Saturday in October already?
It is.
Holy cow! That's always a good game. Both of these teams are really good. Alabama sits right now as an 8.5 point favorite.
I don't think I picked Alabama to win enough. After I've looked at this one again and looked at Tennessee's defensive numbers, their defensive numbers are not very good.
Yeah.
And so I think that's going to be something that for me, Alabama's going to be able to run the football, and if they can run the football, then I think you start talking about trouble time for Tennessee.
Nobody's been more efficient at quarterback than Ty Simpson ever since that. See you later. We're gonna sit in the dark now. Nobody's been more efficient at quarterback than Ty Simpson since that Florida State game. The one that I'm keeping at least one eye on. I rolled with it as my upset pick, just for fun. But Texas A&M is down Le'Veon Moss. It would be just Auburn's luck for Arkansas to either win or look really good a week before Auburn has to go there.
Here's what I know. A Bobby Petrino coached Arkansas team will score some points. Now, Texas A&M's defense is really good. I don't know that it's enough, but I think they will score some points. Like I said, I don't know if that'll be enough to get a win, but I think it's going to be really interesting to see if they can find a way to make that happen.
The night the lights went out at AU Club. Other big games. Look, in the group of 6 here, Old Dominion at JMU is one of the biggest games of the entire season at that level for that playoff spot. You and I are the only ones with any faith in Old Dominion. I just think they've looked good all season long.
I agree. I went with the road team there.
Other big games. Well, USC Notre Dame is one that I keep coming back to because USC lost at Illinois, but it's like I wondered if they would be fool's gold with how they looked at the beginning of the year. I don't necessarily think they are. I think they can be a dark horse playoff team there in the Big Ten. And is Notre Dame actually good, or have they just taken advantage of the fact they haven't played as many good teams?
And that's the thing. And here's the thing: if Notre Dame were to win Saturday, one of your 12 playoff teams is pretty much locked in because their schedule is that bad the rest of the way. If a 10-2 Notre Dame with losses to Texas A&M and Miami, that's the only two. You can pencil them in as a top 12 team. You can just go ahead and do it. So if Notre Dame wins Saturday, I think you're going to have one of those 12 spots taken up already.
We have a few more games here, but we'll, in the interest of getting some time for recruiting, we'll roll over and bring in Bear Jr. And this is a cold take for me and Jason because we do not know what the sexy game of the week is. So we're going to do our best here to figure it out on the fly.
I was surprised it didn't make the Fearless Forecasters, but I have UNLV Boise State. It's kind of the game of the year in the Mountain West. Dan Mullen, Dan the man, was very emphatic that he isn't going anywhere this offseason. Sure. But UNLV's had a really solid start of the season. Obviously, they're undefeated. They looked really bad in that Week 0 game against Idaho State, and I think we all kind of saw that. It was his first game, and we were like, okay, we're not going to be interested in them. But they're undefeated. It's at Boise State. I'll go with the Rebels in this one. I think they're having a great year. I still don't know if they're undefeated, if they're going to make it in the playoff over the American champion. It kind of just feels like the winner of that league is going to go, especially if it's USF and they have a win over Florida.
That'd be tough.
Yeah,
they're playing at Boise, who's doing a blackout while wearing all blue uniforms. So I'm not really sure what that means, but I saw that today going, yes, they're doing a blackout. So the fans are wearing all black, the players are wearing all blue.
I think Texas A&M did the blackout and painted their end zones black. I think Boise State should have painted the entire field black and really just gone all out. So are you taking 12.5 is what they're giving Boise here, which is
that feels like a lot.
That to me goes to show because Boise has lost on the road at USF, who proved out to be really good. Now they got killed in that game, and they didn't look very good against Notre Dame either. But that to me shows that people are looking at 6-0 UNLV and saying,
no, we don't believe it.
No, Boise's not giving. They're giving 12.5.
Yeah. So they're
home
favored by
team's
12.
favored by almost 2 touchdowns over an undefeated team.
So are you going to take? Are you taking UNLV outright?
I'll take Dan the man. Yeah, sure.
Okay, there you go.
Sounds good. Well, I'll hop out here and try not to fall over these stairs behind me because it turns out to be a pretty decent recruiting list coming up this weekend, and obviously anytime you're at home in Jordan-Hare Stadium, you want to make a good impression.
Yeah, should be good. Yeah, Christian will jump in, and I'll kind of start talking about a few folks. But yeah, it's an interesting group when you look at this one. Not a big OV group when you start talking about it, but Christian, there's some names to pay attention to when you start talking about coming in. A guy that we've seen in action, a guy that has been committed elsewhere for a while, Jordan Carter, is one of the biggest names coming in this weekend.
Yeah, Jordan Carter hasn't visited since last year at Big Cat, to my knowledge.
Yeah.
Because he was really, really close to making the decision at that point. Josh Aldridge was the recruiter for him at that time. Auburn gets Hezekiah Harris. It kind of changes things a little bit with Jordan Carter. He commits to Texas A&M. Don't hear from him since. Don't see him since. But Rockville and Tony has built up that relationship, and I think we talked about it on Tuesday's show, as you're rebuilding that buck room, that defensive end room is in a little bit better spot with Morris and Jared Smith, but that buck room needs some more guys.
Yeah.
He's a guy who could play at either spot there. So it's really interesting that he's coming in, especially on an unofficial, because you can just table that official visit for the Iron Bowl.
Absolutely.
You can get him back for it. So it's huge that he's coming in. You mentioned there were a couple of official visitors that were planned to be in. Cooper Jaworski, the offensive lineman, he had to reschedule. Tyron Wortham, his official visit got moved to the Iron Bowl. There are 2 official visitors, Auburn's lawn snapper commitment, and then a kicker from Fort Payne.
Yeah.
I don't know what they have in the water in Fort Payne,
Yeah,
but they just they grow kickers up there.
They do.
He's officially visiting. He's committed to Mississippi State, so that's an interesting one to watch in this class. Auburn might take a kicker there, given the struggles of young Towns Magoo and the future of whether or not he's still with the program in the coming years. In terms of,
I think Corey Barber's a guy that we need to touch on pretty early.
And Dylan Herder.
Yeah, both those 2 guys. Corey Barber's a guy who's had a monster season for Clay Chalkville, committed to Ole Miss. And he has been really good at wide receiver for them. And that's a guy that I think is probably a second-look guy for Auburn. You know who he is. I think Purder's the same way, a guy that we've watched for a couple of years from Booker T here in Tuskegee.
Yeah, really interesting to have 2 in-state SEC commits coming in on official visits who have not. I mean, neither one of those guys have been on campus this year, haven't been on campus this summer, unless you're counting 7-on-7 camps and whatnot. I don't really remember them visiting in the spring.
No, me either.
So these are guys that are kind of popping up again. And then outside of that, it's a huge group of 2027s, 2028s.
Bunch of guys.
Loading up with some of your top guys that you couldn't get in from those classes last weekend, getting them in this weekend. And then, Jason, I think it's worth touching on Shadarius Tootle as well, because we did not touch on him. Or we did. We talked about him on Tuesday's recruiting show. We talked about him as a Georgia commit.
Yes.
Now he's an Auburn commit.
Yes.
Again. The thing we have said multiple times is Auburn is keeping him warm. They keep recruiting him. He keeps visiting. But when are they going to ramp things up? We felt like it was going to happen eventually. Happened this past weekend. Clearly happened when they offered his JUCO brother, older brother, a safety.
Yep.
I believe he's 1 year older than Shadarius, so he'll come in.
Yeah, was a high school quarterback, really athletic safety,
Big,
long
6'4",
body guy,
like 210,
absolutely.
yeah.
And so he's a guy that I think at a minimum is a special teams guy. Doesn't think he might could grow into an outside linebacker depending on what he does. So they could potentially maybe play the same type of position.
Yeah, so Shadarius Tootle back in the class flips his commitment, and I think that speaks a lot to DJ Durkin, who's been the primary recruiter on him. And look, Durkin has been one of the coordinator recruits are interesting. Sometimes coordinators are not super involved in recruiting. DJ Durkin is very involved in recruiting, especially with his guys there at linebacker, and he doesn't miss a whole lot.
Yeah, no.
Elijah Melendez, Bryce Diaz, JJ Falk, who then ends up moving to Buck, but that was one of his guys last year. Adam Balaguna Ali, Shadarius Tootle. I'm missing Wilkes. That's the other guy in this class.
No, yeah.
So
done a really good job of going after talented players, getting them, then those guys showing up and being good players when they get here. So, yes, that's a pretty good track record. So, I think if you're Auburn, you look at that going, you got a chance to have a really strong group of linebackers. And, you think about 2026 and what that group could be.
Jason, unless I'm missing anyone that we really need to talk about.
Yeah, I think maybe just a couple of 27 running backs. C.J. Cowley from Hoover. Mooney Gibson is a kid that we saw from Kell High School over in Georgia. 227 guys. You think about running back, think about what that room – you're going to have to probably take 2 guys in 2027, depending on what it looks like. So that's 2 guys to think about moving forward, and getting those guys on campus is a big deal.
Yeah, so we'll close it out there as we're in the dark, and Patrick's computer is also running out of power. It turns out the outlet back there was not working.
Not working, all right.
So, yeah, we need to get this thing wrapped up. Before we do that, Jason, tell everyone about AU Club. We're out here. Early in the show, you could see behind us the practice screen and stuff. It's beautiful out here. Restaurant. They have a special event tonight, so you can do things like that, but a ton of different perks that you can get if you're a member here at AU Club.
Yeah, absolutely. Come check them out, AU Club.